Ottawa experts. It feels really great to be back in the studio with you again tonight. I'm your host, Barbara Balfour. Well, as we head into the second year of the coronavirus pandemic, months and months of social distancing have rocked our daily routines. They've brought uncertainty into every aspect of our lives and have erased work-life boundaries. Many people are staying up all night worrying. They're worrying about their kids being home all day. They're worrying about their jobs. They're worrying about the economic landscape, and none of this is boding well for our ability to get a good night's sleep, or as a result, our general health. Even before COVID-19, medical experts were expressing concern about increasing rates of insomnia and its impact on both our physical and emotional health. The good news is that the scale of this problem is bringing about change. It's introducing new elements into how we treat sleep disorders and perhaps even more importantly, how seriously we're taking them. Here to finally help you get a good night's sleep and get your life back on track again are three very special guests joining us remotely tonight. First, I'd like to introduce Dr. Sarah Mitchell. She's a native of Ottawa, raised in Manotick, but now lives in San Francisco, where she's a sought-after sleep consultant helping tired parents in Silicon Valley get through the night and sleep through the night again. Dr. Sarah is a chiropractor by training who found her passion empowering parents to teach their little ones to sleep. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me. So excited to be here.
Next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Brian Laquanan. He's an educator, speaker, and an addiction and mental health specialist who serves as the primary therapist at Premier Treatment Centers, A Better Life Recovery, and A Mission for Michael. He treats clients who are struggling with anxiety, depression, PTSD, and a variety of severe mood disorders. Dr. Laquanan uses cognitive behavioral treatment to cure insomnia for those who want to stop using sleep medications. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Laquanan.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
And finally, it's a pleasure to welcome Dr. Lisa Medallia. She is the founder of the evidence-based sleep app Dr. Lullaby, which offers sleep lessons and access to coaching by Johns Hopkins trained behavioral health experts. Dr. Medallia is the co-author of the book Putting Sleep Problems to Bed. She's the adult and pediatric insomnia specialist at the University of Chicago and has trained at Johns Hopkins and Harvard. Previously, you may have spotted her on Dr. Oz and in the New York Times. Dr. Medallia, it's an honor to have you join us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
I'd like
to be here tonight.
Thank you so much for joining us. I'd like to start off by discussing a fairly new term that's on the tip of everyone's tongues these days. It's called Coronasomnia. Maybe we could start with you, Dr. Lisa. What is Coronasomnia and how did it come about? What's causing it? How is it different from, I guess, regular insomnia?
So coronasomnia is a term that's being used quite a bit to describe sleep difficulties related to the pandemic. So the problems that we are seeing that have been going on since the pandemic related to changes in schedule, work from home, schooling from home, and increased anxiety, decreased exercise, increased screen time, all of these factors that are new since the pandemic that have increased sleep problems. We're seeing that more than half of our population is now struggling with sleep, which is a significant increase compared to where we were previously. And it's a real concern because of not only the consequences that sleep loss have on our daytime function, but also because of how sleep loss impacts our immune system, given everything going on right now.
Absolutely. They say that getting a good night's sleep is really about a great prevention strategy for some of the problems that can develop later on in life. Now, Dr. Sarah, as someone who deals exclusively with parents of babies, toddlers, and young children, I'm interested to hear how coronasomnia has impacted your clientele and some of the problems that they're coming to you to try and help them solve.
Absolutely. Well, I've got a lot of tech parents who have 6-month-olds and 3-year-olds who are no longer going to preschool, or they no longer have their nanny around to help them. And they're trying to meet the demands of their busy jobs while getting their kids to nap or have a good night's sleep. So they're feeling stressed and taxed and tired and overwhelmed. So I'm helping them get on regular sleep schedules and teach their babies and toddlers to sleep, to take that pressure off and have a regular schedule.
And we definitely want to do a deep dive into that. later on in the show. But Dr. Brian, I'm curious to hear your perspective as someone who treats individuals with addictions and severe mental health issues. I imagine that your work must be going through the roof right now. You must be very, very busy these days.
Absolutely. The bittersweet of it all, right? In terms of the reasons why people are coming in to seek therapy, right, is unfortunate because of the pandemic, but it is a silver lining is because people are seeking help. And what we're finding is with the pandemic, stress levels are extremely heightened. When stress levels come about, maladaptive ways can result, such as we've seen a heightened spike in substance abuse. We are seeing people who are isolating more. We are seeing people who are gravitating towards electronics, seeking comfort in other ways, whether it be a lot of time on electronics. We are seeing a lot of people who are having impaired sleep due to stress. They're staying up later. Their schedules are impaired. Coronavirus has definitely disrupted our level of structure, routine, and accountability. Taking away our gyms, taking away our fellowship and people activities has caused a great deal of distress for people. And sleep is typically 1/3 of our life. And if we're not sleeping well, it's going to carry over to other areas of our life, our social, physical health, and our mental health as well.
Dr. Brian, how many hours of sleep should the average adult get? I mean, we all hear about these extremely successful type A personalities who brag about only needing 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night. Is this possible, or are they just fooling themselves?
Well, that is a tough number, is because with cognitive behavioral treatment for insomnia, which is the specialized treatment for curing insomnia, it really ranges. But typically speaking, 7 to 9 hours of sleep for the average adult. The average adult actually gets 6.7 hours. But like anything, we could overdo things. We can oversleep or undersleep, right? But according to CBTI, which is the short for cognitive behavioral treatment for insomnia, you sleep as much as to feel refreshed. In my practice with clients, I typically don't like to go under 6 hours, right? But typically about 7 to 9 hours is where people feel rejuvenated, feel refreshed, memory, cognition is optimal, but there is some variability within that.
Dr. Lisa, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on what do you think about terms like night owl and early bird? Does that really exist, or are these rooted in myths around sleep and our need for sleep?
So night owl and early bird definitely exist. So these are terms to describe circadian tendencies. So we all have an internal clock, and our internal clock drives when our brains start and stop producing melatonin. Melatonin is our sleep hormone. So in the teenage years, we tend to see more night owls. They have more tendencies for a delayed sleep phase, meaning their internal clock is set so that they want to go to bed later and sleep in later. But unfortunately, typically, school starts in high school very early, and so it's really not conducive for the sleep nature in teens. And then on the opposing side, our seniors, they tend to be more morning larks. They tend to have an advanced sleep phase where their internal clock is set so they want to go to bed earlier and wake up earlier. And so that's why we see that early bird special at restaurants for our seniors. And so the interesting thing that I've seen in clinic with the pandemic is that some of our teenagers are getting a little carried away with these later school start times, and ending up in my clinic, parents are saying, oh my goodness. And with this later start time, and my teenager is now staying up until 5 a.m. playing video games, and we're now starting to be back in person with school, and they're going to have to be waking up earlier, and I don't know what to do.
I've certainly heard of teenagers staying up until all hours of the morning watching TikTok and indulging in social media as well. But Dr. Lisa, do you think that we are intrinsically wired to become either a night owl or an early bird? Like, do you think we can train ourselves out of that habit?
So research shows that these tendencies do run in families. So oftentimes if you see somebody who has a more pronounced circadian rhythm, so instead of just having a tendency, they actually meet full-blown criteria for a disorder, meaning that they're more than 2 hours out of sync with what either society or school or work demands, and then they're suffering from insomnia or excessive daytime sleepiness. Then we have a disorder on our hands, something that needs attention. And so when that happens, there are absolutely techniques and strategies that we use to help such patients. So we can use light treatments in the morning to help wake patients up. Dyson makes a great light box, and so does Philips. Those devices can help tell the brain to stop producing melatonin if used 15 to 20 minutes upon waking. And then, small doses of melatonin, a little tiny 0.5 or 1 milligram dose, 3 or 4 hours before the natural peak sleepiness point, can help to slowly advance the circadian rhythm in our teenagers so that they feel sleepy at an earlier point. And then alongside, we typically use some of the strategies from CBTI, from that cognitive behavioral treatment for insomnia protocol that Brian was talking about, as it is evidence-based for helping to manage the insomnia that tends to go along with these disorders.
Now, Dr. Sarah, I'm curious to hear your perspective from working with parents of young children. Do you see sleep deprivation becoming a problem among toddlers and younger children as well? What are some of the trends that you're seeing and the common problems that parents are coming to you to help them solve?
Right. Some of the common trends with toddlers who have these working parents and they don't have their regular childcare is they're getting a lot more screen time in the daytime, and they're lacking that same amount of structure. A lot of these parents are just doing the best they can to get through every day by day and meet their demanding jobs. So we're seeing toddlers not get the socialization and the interaction that they crave during the day. They're not getting the same amount of energy out during the day. And so they're really not quite as tired by the end of the day. We're getting a lot more bedtime battles happening and frustrated parents. And this is on top of, a very common lack of sleep when you're a parent of a child less than 1, right? So we've got the toddler issues happening, and then we've got the regular sleep deprivation for parents of babies combined with lack of childcare. So very tired parents out there.
Thank you so much for that. I'm curious to hear more about all three of you, your tips and strategies on bedtime routine and getting a better night's sleep for every age group, including picking the right pillow and mattress. But right now we have to go to break, so we'll be right back after this. Don't go away. Hi, welcome back to Ottawa Experts. I'm your host, Barbara Balfour. We are joined tonight by Dr. Mitchell, Dr. Laquanan, and Dr. Medallia to help you find out how you can finally get a good night's sleep and get your life back on track even during COVID-19. Dr. Laquanan, I'd like to start the conversation with you. Talk to us a little bit about the different types of sleep disorders that exist. How do you know that you're just having the odd bad night versus you have a problem that necessitates medical attention?
Great question, because what we find a lot are that a lot of people who have sleep conditions or sleep disorder go unnoticed, right? Sometimes it's a bed partner that reveals. I work in treatment, and it's funny when we talk about sleep that, wow, you snore so loud, and the person doesn't believe, they'd never realize that they sleep so bad, which we call obstructive sleep apnea. Right? People say, you know what, you stop breathing in the middle of the night. Or you know what, you talk in your sleep, right? And sometimes bed partners, family members are invaluable sources for discovering a sleep impairment. We also know that there are sleep studies, right? In-home or a lab study. And what that does is it monitors a lot of physiological, neurological responses to see what's going on in our different sleep states. So that's another way to diagnose it. But the different types of sleep disorders, and there are quite a great number of them. Typically, the most common is the sleep apnea, right, which you stop breathing for a certain period of time. Like I mentioned earlier, obstructive sleep apnea is the other common one where the sleep apnea is caused by some type of an obstruction. But there's a lot. There's hypersomnia, there's sleepless leg syndrome, so many. And where it becomes, back to your question of where it becomes a problem, at least for the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, it is when it happens several times a week for at least 1 month, typically speaking, and it impairs other areas of your life. So sometimes we may not recognize that it's a problem because sleep, unfortunately, has been one of those conditions that are underreported. They've done studies with people who come into physicians' offices for a gastric issue, a heart condition, and sleep is endorsed as one of their complaints, but it is not addressed sometimes, and sometimes it is, but not looked into. And what we're seeing a lot more of is that people are recognizing that insomnia or some type of sleep impairment is a comorbidity to other underlying conditions, whether it be depression, whether it be hypertension, whether it be diabetes, overweight. So I think one of the first things is to gauge is, number one, am I feeling tired during the day? Am I restless at night? Am I getting up multiple times a night? Does it take me a great deal of time to fall asleep? And real quickly, the three diagnoses for insomnia is difficulty falling asleep, staying asleep, or sometimes waking up too early and not being able to fall asleep. So those are the typical symptoms of insomnia, because a lot of people sometimes think just not falling asleep is the only symptom of insomnia. So those are some of the typical symptoms, but there are a lot of other ones that I think more invasive testing and getting a qualitative feedback from your family members or your loved one could also be very important.
Really interesting. Now, Dr. Sarah, I'd like to go back to you and hear your thoughts from your perspective. Do you see good sleep hygiene as something that really starts in early childhood? And how can parents take on that responsibility? Maybe talk us through the different stages of a child's development and what parents can do to ensure that their child gets enough sleep and that it's a pleasant process for everybody involved.
Yeah. So the sleep hygiene is really fascinating because so many of the tips that we give for babies and toddlers apply to adults as well, right? Sleep hygiene. You want a room that's free of distractions. So ditch those mobiles, right? They're distracting rather than soothing. You want a dark room that's not too warm because our bodies prefer cooler temperatures to sleep in. So around 69 or 19 degrees Celsius is an ideal room temperature to sleep in. And then you want to think about all the different five senses and how that plays into your sleep. So you want comfortable sheets that aren't scratchy, that are soft, that feel good to sleep on. You want a lovely scent in your room, which is where all those aromatherapy contexts come in. You want it to be very dark and cold. And the other thing to remember in the baby and toddler stage is that while the drive to sleep is biological, right? We all have a buildup of a protein in our blood that signals our brain when it's time to sleep. The way we sleep is actually a learned habit. So how you fall asleep at bedtime, if you're a little person who needs to be rocked, fed, held to sleep, or laid beside, perhaps if you're a toddler, when that kiddo wakes up in the night, which all humans do, that child often expects that same response to help them fall back to sleep because that's what they've learned and that's what they know. So one of the common challenges I see parents make is that they try and tackle night wakings as a first attempt to solve the problem. But really you need to look back to how is your child falling asleep at bedtime? Because there is evidence to show that the more you interact and engage with your child at bedtime, the more night wakings your kiddos, babies, and toddlers will actually have.
Now, Dr. Lisa, you do a lot of work with children and with parents. Do you find it common that children will wake up and then crawl into bed with their parents? And is that okay, or is that a big mistake?
It's actually really interesting because since the pandemic, I've actually seen a lot more co-sleeping. And, my biggest thing is always to say to people, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I really try when I'm working with families, be it parents, kids, adults, that, to try to have a non-judgmental stance. And if it's working for you, it's working for me. That being said, if somebody comes to my clinic, then it usually isn't working for them. They're parents are at a point where they're ready to have the kids out of the bed. I think these days that kids are feeling stressed and anxious too. They're really confused by all of the changes that are happening. And why can't I see my friends? I mean, they're being told and they understand it on some level, but these changes are really, really hard for kids. And when kids feel and notice changes and feel anxious and stressed, then they crave more parent attention. They crave more comfort. And so I do think that's probably why we're seeing more of the kiddos sneaking into their parents' beds, not just 2 and 3-year-olds, 7, 8-year-olds doing this as well. And so when parents are sick and tired of being sick and tired, and they're ready to have the beds back to themselves, and the spouses are ready to have that alone time back with their spouse, then we can work on an evidence-based plan for getting kids more independent again with sleep.
Now, what happens when the child simply doesn't want to go to sleep? I mean, I remember myself as a kid, being sent to bed really felt like a punishment. You're old when getting a nap just sounds awesome. But when the kid just doesn't want to go, maybe they have fear of missing out, or maybe the child has older siblings and they're worried that their siblings are going to have more fun without them, and maybe a tantrum might result. What are some strategies that the parents can employ? Is it okay to have a little bit of bribery and negotiation?
Yeah, we try to stay away from the term bribery and kind of talk about it more as reinforcement, using a reward system. But, in our digital health app, Dr. Lullaby, we talk about these types of problems. There's bedtime refusal, which is kind of what you're referring to now, and trouble sleeping alone, which is what you were referring to earlier, when kids are kind of crawling into the bed or needing parents at night. And so when we see bedtime refusal, kids that are having tantrums, meltdowns at night, refusing to go to bed, or even just refusing to get off their electronics. That's a big one these days. It's not just that they're having tantrums with the idea of bedtime. It's that they're having a tantrum with the idea of stopping the screens. And that's really challenging. What I encourage parents to do is not wait until the last minute to make that transition. If it's 8 p.m. and it's bedtime, and that's the time where you're trying to take the, Xbox controller away, and then there's a fight and a meltdown, then the child is then activated, and that there's that sort of anger response or frustration response, which is going to make it even harder for that kiddo to fall asleep. So first and foremost, we ask the parents back that up and take the screens the hour before bedtime, and then go into a relaxing pre-sleep ritual, make it very structured and very consistent. I always encourage parents to pick a song, play it on repeat during that hour.
Baby Shark.
Use classical conditioning. Baby Shark. And, play it on. Maybe something a little bit more calming. Maybe more like Enya or something. But, we want something that's gonna, cue the child to hear, when they hear that song, okay, I get it. I've got to go through these steps. I'm going to take my bath. I'm going to read a little book, and then I'm going to get into bed. But repetition, same song, same book, same order of the relaxing pre-sleep ritual, and making sure that you have that backup plan where it's an hour before bed that you take the screens away. And then the other thing to do is tie it to a morning reward. So if you can say to your child that if you give me these screens within 5 minutes of me asking, then tomorrow I will give you back your screen. Screens are a privilege. That's something that, parents work really hard to make the money to give these privileges to their kids. And so we need to remind kids that this is a privilege. You don't just automatically get access to play all day just because. So they get access only if they follow the house rules. And so when they follow the house rules, they get rewarded. If they break the house rules, then there is a consequence. And that's a life lesson that we want to teach them at a young age, because that's life,
I
right?
think you're right on the money about that.
Real.
Yeah, I want to shift the conversation back to Dr. Laquanan, and I'm wondering if you've ever heard the term revenge bedtime. Now that's when the day catches up to you and you haven't accomplished anything that you wanted, and then you end up staying up all night to try to catch up. Is that something that comes up often in your practice?
Well, actually, it's a relatively new term. What you're referring to is revenge bedtime procrastination, or what's also called sleep revenge. In terms of where it originated, some people say in Asia, so to speak. But the idea behind that is that people are somewhat making up for time that they didn't get during the day, whether it be because of their working, they're dealing with family, and that is their me time. That nighttime sleep opportunity time is now that me time, whether it be catching up on my Netflix videos, whether it be engaging in my social media, whether it be reading the news. And that's what's happening. And how that can be very challenging is we are cutting into our sleep opportunity, right? If we are going to bed later and waking up earlier or going to bed, we are shifting our 24-hour clock. And we're finding, especially with kids, right, is that they are getting sleep deprived, meaning that their sleep opportunity is becoming more and more condensed. And I mentioned earlier that the average adult, right, we say encourage 7 to 9 hours, but kids sometimes could need a little bit more, right? We know, of course, infants need a great deal of sleep, but especially because during those really critical periods of time for children and adolescents, there's a lot going on there, the release of hormones. We are talking about memory development, cognitive development, growth, and so forth. And so if we are condensing that sleep opportunity time, we are really depriving them of some certain opportunities for major developmental milestones. So yes, sleep revenge, we have to be very mindful of that and know that it's a really phenomenon. We just so happen to put a name to it now, but it's been going on ever since the evolution of technology. Now we have a name to it, but yes, it is very real.
Dr. Laquanan, you've really shed some light on what an interesting and fascinating field of study sleep really is, and I want to do more of a deep dive into cognitive behavioral treatment and how we can use that to treat insomnia, but first we're going to break. We'll be right back after this. Don't go away. Welcome back to Ottawa Experts. I'm your host, Barbara Balfour. Hi, welcome back to Ottawa Experts. I'm your host, Barbara Balfour. Dr. Laquanan, before we went to break, we talked a little bit about not a relatively new phenomenon, one that's been around for quite some time, but it's only relatively recently been assigned a name, the idea of revenge bedtime, catching up on everything that we somehow have missed out on during the day. And I wanted to follow up to our conversation before we left for break as to some strategies that you might suggest to your clients and patients on how they can better manage their time and use problem-solving skills to allow themselves a certain amount of rest time every evening or every night.
Mm-hmm. Easier said than done, but discipline, right? It's going to be critically important, is because the lure of social media, as we need just one more video. We've all been there, right? YouTube is great at it. You watch one thing on how to make tamales. Next thing you know, there's 4 other videos on how to make tamales from different cultures, right? And so that's what we have to recognize is what they do. If you're shopping on an online shopping, we know you pick one thing, here's what we suggest. So discipline, really setting those limits. And one of the things I wrote an article on sleep revenge and some recommendations and tips, but one of the recommendations is buddy up with someone. If you live with someone, buddy up to say, come this time, we are done. Right? Holding yourself accountable that this is our sleep opportunity time and we are done. I would say also carving out some of that me time during the day. I'd rather someone take 5 minutes every hour versus catching up and diving into your sleep opportunity time. So that's one way is to get your fill. Make sure you're getting your fill earlier in the day, feeding that emotional battery, that physical battery, whether it be a small walk. And so that's one of the things, is to take care of yourself earlier on in increments, set a very strict time, maybe buddy up with someone that's going to hold each other accountable, and just recognize, is that you can't make up for lost sleep. There's a concept called sleep debt, which is we think we can make up for lost sleep, and we can't. So let's say I'm going to make up for my me time on Friday night, but I'm going to sleep 15 hours on Saturday. What we're doing is we're actually disrupting our 24-hour clock. We are disrupting our patterns, and it has this carryover effect. So those would be some of my most prominent suggestions initially for really battling the sleep revenge.
Now, Dr. Lisa, if you've made up your mind that you're going to spend 8 hours in bed tonight, and somewhere in the middle of it you wake up and you toss and turn for hours at a time, is it a good idea to get out of bed and just start doing something else, or should you kind of tough it out? What strategy would you employ for people in that situation that maybe wake up regularly or often throughout the night?
Yeah, sure. So when somebody is experiencing a nighttime awakening and they're noticing, for example, a lot of my patients will say their mind starts to race and they start to kind of reflect from the previous day or plan for the next day or worry about things from the past, feel anxious, feel frustrated, and then as a result, try harder to sleep. And so, unfortunately, when it comes to sleep and insomnia, the harder you try to sleep, the less likely you are to sleep. And so that's the longer that you lay there, feeling stressed, feeling anxious, and kind of, as I call it, in thought land, the more likely that you'll continue to lay there. So instead, what we'd recommend is that you use a technique in CBTI that's called stimulus control. And in that strategy, you get out of bed and you go sit out on a couch and you look through a book or thumb through a magazine just for 5 minutes. And you're using this approach for a purpose of getting your mind off of whatever it was that you were thinking about in bed. And then you want to hop back into bed. And if again you're back into bed and your mind is racing because of what we call classical conditioning, so night after night, if you're spending a chunk of time in bed awake with your mind racing, then your brain is very used to going into mind racing mode during the night. So it kind of goes automatically into that state of mind. And so you have to work on this training, go back out to the couch again, 5 more minutes of reading, then back into the bed. And if you repeatedly do this for, about a month's time, every time that you're experiencing that averse response during a wake up, then you'll see that classical conditioning kind of shifts things and your bed begins to then cue a state of sleepiness and sleep itself.
I love that. I think that's so important. Now, want to shift back to Dr. Sarah. I'm curious to hear what you think of naps. Obviously, not just for children, but for their parents. Let's say if the reason you're up throughout the night is because your child hasn't slept, is it okay to sleep when your child does? What kind of advice do you give in those sorts of situations?
Yeah, I think it really depends on your child's age, but I'm a huge fan of napping. In the first few months of infancy, naps are extremely important. And this goes back to that whole drive to sleep being biological and that buildup of that protein that signals your brain it's time to sleep, right? So children are growing exponentially, like they double their weight by the time they're 5 months. And so their metabolism is working really hard. They're breaking down our ATP fuel molecule, and that buildup of sleep pressure is happening very quickly, which is why there's so many naps in those first few months, right? A 4-month-old might be napping 4 times a day, but by the time they're 8 months, that's reduced down to 2 naps. So timing is one of the most important things when it comes to sleep. And I'm hearing that with Dr. Lisa and Dr. Brian as well, right? If you go to bed too early, you're going to get frustrated and you lie there. Same for our kiddos. If you go to bed too late, well, then our kiddos are so tired, they want us and they need us that much more. And eventually they can often fall into the sleep debt, like Dr. Brian was talking about with his adult patients. The 2 most common reasons I see kids struggling with sleep from, birth until about age 3 is, 1, I'm reliant on something external to help me relax into sleep. And so when I wake in the night, which all humans do, I look for that same thing to help me fall asleep. The second reason is I'm so overtired. I'm in a sleep debt. So over these last few months, I've woken up every few hours in the night and I didn't get the quality of sleep that I need. And now I'm more tired and it's actually harder to get me to fall asleep and stay asleep.
Now, Dr. Sarah, I just want to bring up the book that you recently wrote. We'll bring up the cover of the book jacket on the screen here in a minute. But tell us a little bit about the book and where it's available.
Yeah, thank you. The Helping Baby Sleep Method, the art and science of teaching your baby to sleep, because it really is balancing the biology of sleep and the behavior and the parental interventions and the boundaries as well. It's available on Amazon right now. It just launched last week. We're currently #1 in new release under pediatrics, so super excited about that. But my goal here was to really give parents step-by-step instructions on how to achieve those great sleep goals. So in the newborn stage, we're not talking about sleep training. I hate that term, sleep training, because sleep is a learned skill. So we're actually teaching our kiddos to sleep. And in the newborn stage, they don't really have that capacity yet, but we can absolutely work on gentle sleep shaping, right? Setting them up for good success, again, with the timing of sleep and the messaging of the sleep and all those little bedtime routines that you can start, very short little routines, but you can start them very early on, right? And then in the 4 to 24 months age, we're working on how do you have an independent sleeper, a kiddo that you can put down completely awake without being made drowsy, because drowsy but awake is one of those things that has kind of set a lot of parents up to fail over the years, including myself when I was a little one, right? Because if sleep is a learned skill, the skill that you're trying to teach is the ability to relax yourself into sleep. And if we're putting them down drowsy but awake, we've done that work for them. So the book gives parents a step-by-step approach, looking at the understanding of sleep, the sleep science, the timing of sleep, what's age appropriate, and helping you guide you on that journey to have that great sleeper so you can all get the rest that your family needs.
Fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And Dr. Sarah, I want to tap into your chiropractor background by asking you to give our viewers some advice on mattresses and pillows, how to choose the right one, and how do you know when it's time to toss it and get a new one?
Yeah, great question. So what I've been noticing in the trend of mattresses over the years, and I'm sure you've noticed this too, is there's a lot more, especially here in the United States, a lot more box delivery of your mattress. So it comes in a box, you open it up, you order it online, and it pops out. Okay, and that's working really well for a lot of families. But the longevity of your mattress is related to a few different things. One is the quality of its fabrication. And so I do worry that if you can fold it up in a box and send it over, that it won't have great longevity. The second thing is who's sleeping on this mattress, because someone who's 200 pounds will wear their mattress out much more quickly than someone who is 120 pounds, right? So those are two important factors when you're thinking about your mattress. The third thing I've noticed is a lot of mattresses now come with like a built-in topper. And so you can't flip them over, and change the positioning of that mattress like we could in, a few years back to give it that long-lasting longevity, right? So I believe, 5 years ago, we used to say like your mattress is probably good for 10 to 15 years. And at this point, with the change in quality of mattress, I think it's fair to say it's closer to 6 to 8, but it also depends on who's sleeping on it, right? And then with pillows, the purpose of a pillow, what is that, right? If it depends on what position you choose to sleep in. And that position, if it's on your side, the purpose of a pillow is to really keep your spine in straight alignment so that your head's not, flexed one way or the other, right? For stomach sleepers, you want a pillow that's as thin as possible because you don't want it causing your neck to be in too much extension when you're sleeping, which could wear on your joints a little bit more. And if you're sleeping on your back, the purpose of a pillow is really to help you kind of gently flex your neck so that you can sleep with your mouth closed. So when do you get a new mattress or pillow? Mattress is definitely when you feel like it's sagging, when it's becoming uncomfortable, and if you find that you're starting to wake up with more and more back pain. Just want to be sure though, like I notice that I'm getting more and more back pain because I'm not as active as I used to be. I'm sitting a lot more. It's not necessarily my mattress, it's my lifestyle change that's happening right now. But if nothing's changed in your lifestyle and you're feeling stiff when you get up in the morning, that would be a sign to investigate, how long have I had this mattress? Is it time to change for something new?
And you had mentioned something, a practice that you yourself incorporate into your routine, something called mouth taping. Talk to us a little bit about that. Is it controversial? Is it for everyone? What do people need to know?
Yeah. So what can interrupt your sleep? One of the things is breathing through your mouth. Our bodies were designed to be breathing through our nose. Nasal breathing has the benefit of cleaning and humidifying the air that you breathe, right? What happens to a lot of folks is that we start to breathe with our mouth open in the night. And the signs of that are we wake up with a very, very dry mouth, or we notice a lot of drool on the pillow in the morning. So we were definitely sleeping with our mouths open, right? And why does this even matter? Well, since our bodies were designed to sleep with our mouths closed, when our mouth is open, it can sometimes impede your airway with either tissue or mucus. And that can cause your body to wake you up more in the night, trying to tell you to shut your mouth so you can breathe through your nose again. And when you wake up, like all humans wake up in the night, but when you wake up excessively in the night, that impedes the quality of your sleep and you don't feel as rested in the morning. Because you should wake up for the morning, ideally a little bit before your alarm, and feel rested. And if you're not, then you have to look back at, why is this happening to me? What could I be eating? What is the timing of my sleep off? What activities in my daily life are silently sabotaging my nighttime sleep? So something that I've been practicing lately is taking like a 3M paper tape from the first aid section in your pharmacy, and I actually tape my mouth closed at night. And I started doing this last summer after reading a book called The Oxygen Advantage. And the idea here is that you're forcing your body to adapt and breathe through your nose. And breathing through your nose also has the benefit of releasing nitric oxide, which is a vasodilator. So it helps decrease your blood pressure and increase your circulation. And there's a study to show with men who had benign tumors in their nose, so they couldn't breathe through their nose. When they got those tumors removed, their erectile dysfunction went away because now there's more blood flow to all areas of their body. Pretty fascinating, the impact of that.
Absolutely fascinating.
So taping your mouth closed, yeah, it can.
We're just about to go to break, but when we come back, I want to hear more from Dr. Medallia on a new app that she's developed to help people with sleeping problems, as well as do a deep dive into cognitive behavioral treatment with Dr. Laquanan. We'll be right back after the break. Welcome back to Auto Experts. I'm your host, Barbara Balfour, and on tonight's show, we're discussing how to get a good night's sleep and get your life back on track. Dr. Lisa, I wanted to do a deep dive into this new app that you've developed. It's an evidence-based sleeping app, Dr. Lullaby. Tell us about it. What features does it offer, and how can Canadians benefit?
Essentially a digital version of the work that I provide in clinic. So in clinic, I work with adults and children, and we teach them evidence-based lessons about changes that we want them to make. And so the app includes brief videos of me teaching the lessons about the different concepts. For example, we talked today about stimulus control. There's relaxation strategies lessons. There's lessons for parents to use behavior charts or graduated extinction, and there's lessons that teach anything from babies, lessons related to babies, toddlers, school-age kids, teens, and adults. And we include cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia lessons and sleepwalking. Sleepwalking is really the bread and butter of the work that we do in an insomnia clinic, where we want people to fill in sleep logs each morning and track their sleep. And really, this is not just about people who have insomnia, actually. It's really just about optimizing sleep for all. Something that Dr. Bryan mentioned, just having sleep discipline, it really rung true to me. I believe in the importance of sleep discipline. I believe that sleep needs to be the next thing on the Cheerios box. And using a product like Dr. Lullaby is really meant to be a way to kind of coach you and walk you through tips and tricks for how to live in a healthy way with regards to sleep, just like you would for diet or exercise. And the other really exciting feature that we now have is we have these video visits with our coaches who can help hold your hands while you try to make these changes, just like you'd have an exercise or a nutrition coach. If you want to make these healthy habit changes and get to better nights and do the right thing by your sleep, then you can work with our PhD coaches. They all trained at Johns Hopkins, and they're all wonderful, have excellent knowledge base, and can teach lessons and provide support, motivation, and help you to adhere to these plans.
Now, when nothing else works, the lavender oil and the chamomile tea and the soundtrack of ocean waves crashing doesn't work anymore, what are some strategies that people can turn to next?
Yeah, I mean, and that's really kind of what the reason was for developing the app is that a lot of people are, the first place they go is they look on the internet. Let me find out what I should do differently. But the internet has just such a large range of just in terms of credibility of sources. And so it's really important to make sure if you've tried the basic sleep hygiene changes and you're still noticing trouble with sleep, it's really important that you look for something evidence-based. So, for example, the Society for Behavioral Sleep Medicine, they have a listing of all of the providers that are board certified and formally trained as insomnia specialists, and it's a great resource page to just see if you can find somebody in your area. But unfortunately, I do think there's not too many in Canada, and because of the shortage of just the number of board certified providers. That's why we came up with this app as a way to digitize that work and improve access to evidence-based strategies so that people can just learn how to do what they need to do to get enough sleep and transition effectively into sleep, let go of thoughts, emotions de-escalated, and have the sleep that they need so that they have the days that they need. We want people to be able to experience more fulfilling and more productive days, even in the face of the pandemic. When there is elevated stress, there are ways to be able to have good days, to have productivity, and sleep, getting more sleep is a great tool for being able for you to enter into your days with the most energy, thinking power, and best mood you can.
Now, you currently have some promotions available both on the app and on the coaching. Where can people go to find out more about those?
Yeah, so the app is actually now live on the iOS store. So they can go right to the iOS store. We are currently just at $9.99 a month. We wanted to make it really affordable. We're usually at $19.99 a month, but we're currently on promotion. So hopefully people take advantage of that launch discount. And the website also gives some more information as well. So it's drlullaby.com. And yeah, our video visits are now available with our coaches. They're wonderful, and they are also our current launch price for them is that it's $59, whereas they're usually $99 for a session. So I hope everyone takes advantage of our temporary launch pricing because it's a really great way to work on sleep and get to healthy sleep habits so that you can have the days better.
Certainly could be so useful for so many people. I want to go back to Dr. Laquanan. I know you're a big fan of cognitive behavioral treatment. Talk us through that. What is it exactly, and does it work for everybody? Is it typically as a last resort before going to medication, or is it something that's useful when medication doesn't work? Give us a bit of background on that.
Sure. Well, actually, it's the latter. So cognitive behavioral treatment for insomnia, which I'll refer to as CBTI, is a structured, manualized treatment for curing insomnia. The American Medical Association identifies CBTI as one of those modalities that can cure insomnia. And basically what it does is it focuses on our natural pressure to sleep, right? Unless we have some co-occurring acute psychiatric condition or a medical condition, right, that's untreated, we all have this ability to have pressure to sleep. When you wake up, the longer you're awake, the stronger that sleep pressure build. So CBTI is typically for those people who have had chronic insomnia. They've had a lot of medication. They don't want to take patients anymore. So that's when sleep specialists refer patients to me, that is usually what happens. They've done a sleep study, right? There's no co-occurring sleep disorder issues, and it's basically bad habits. And that's what CBTI does. Its basic premise is people are spending too much time in bed, not sleeping, and they're engaging in behaviors that perpetuates non-sleep. And the three major areas to be effective with curing insomnia, number one is sleep hygiene, which are instructions to help you sleep better. We talked about it earlier, stimulus control, which is basically this association. People that aren't sleeping well, bedtime, nighttime is no longer about serenity, tranquility. It's about frustration, anxiety, resentment. And the last one is sleep restriction. It's a paradox, right? I'm coming to you to get more sleep, and you're telling me you're going to restrict my sleep. But actually what it's doing is it's focusing on that sleep pressure by adjusting people's bedtimes and wake times to build and maximize on that sleep pressure. So all three of those can cure insomnia. It has been shown amazingly that it's as effective as sleep medications in the upfront for falling asleep. But they even show that when you have a level of success with CBTI, when you even stop all the protocols, you're able to have those good sleep nights up to 1 year. So that really shows the robustness and the resilience of the CBTI techniques. So
those are great results. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I want to go back to Dr. Lisa and ask you, what are your thoughts on some of the sleep medications and over-the-counter sleep aids that are available? CBD oil, for instance. What's your take on that?
So yeah, I mean, it really kind of depends on the circumstance. I try to, there are some patients that I'll work with in clinic, and we will go through the CBTI protocol that Dr. Brian was referring to, and we'll be able to make some gains, but yet they're not fully satisfied, or they still feel like they want to go further with it. So at that point in time, then I might refer back to primary care, and they might consider something like trazodone at a low dose, or amitriptyline, or sometimes gabapentin if they have headaches as well. So there are medication options that sometimes can be used if we're not seeing a full enough response to CBTI. Although, like Dr. Brian's saying, it really, for the most part, when you're able to kind of customize the protocol and you're able to kind of dive in and address comorbidities and work really closely with the patient, have good rapport, we usually do see very, very strong results. And so it's often the case that we don't need to turn to medication. But the other issue is that when, because there aren't enough people doing CBTI, when somebody goes to their primary care doctor and says, I'm having trouble sleeping, that's what's going to be prescribed. And
unfortunately,
so
we are at the end of our time tonight, but I want to thank you all so much for joining us and for lending your expertise. Dr. Brian Laquanan, Dr. Lisa Medallia, and Dr. Sarah Mitchell, thank you so much for joining us this evening and lending your expertise. And for those of you who are watching us tonight, thanks so much for watching. Have a great evening, and we'll see you again in the studio next week.